I was sitting here just grubbing up on my Chipotle after getting back from the gym, and I got this video idea that popped in my mind. And to be frank, I thought if I waited until after finishing this food, the idea wasn't going to be as fresh. And I'm going to sacrifice this food and let it be cold just in order so I can get this thought out of my mind. I have my Bible here in case I need it. But the thing that I've just been sitting on is the fact that your lust is not actually the problem. And if you give me a moment, especially as a man of God, if you give me a moment, I'm going to explain this to you and give you a completely different perspective. That's my goal of this video, is to help you really develop a mindset. And I want to try and change your beliefs and the way that you view lust so that way you can actually start to make a change. And you know, I was thinking about this client that actually joined my program today. I was talking with him a couple of days ago. Initially, like when we were first, going back and forth about what was going on with lust and pornography and all this kind of stuff. And he was in therapy, and one of the main things they've been talking about is this bad breakup that he went through. And you know what's so interesting is if you think lust is the problem and not a symptom, then the breakup as a man of God causing him to go back to lust or pornography doesn't actually make sense. And let me tell you why. He was a man of God. They weren't having sex, like they were waiting until marriage, all this kind of stuff, right? Yet once the breakup happened, he was kind of going back to it already every now and then. But once the breakup happened, it started going up even more. He started using it even more. Now let me ask you a very obvious question. The moment that breakup happened, in which that relationship, it's not like they were having sex anyways, did his lust or his testosterone suddenly go up 700 and now he's just more lustful? He has more sexual temptations, any of this kind of stuff? No, not at all. What actually happened? Well, he lost his connection. He lost his person that he loved. And so ultimately what started to happen was there was more of a wound and more of emotional problems going on. And then the lust started to ramp up. That is so important for you to notice, because every time you watch videos online where people are talking about getting out of lust or pornography, they're only going to try and treat your symptoms. You know how when you go to a doctor's office now, in fact, this is so interesting. I've been having migraines last week. I think it was just a combination of stress and overworking myself and looking at screens too much and maybe allergies and a couple other things. But it was so bad. Last Tuesday, I literally had to lay down, and I was bedridden for Tuesday, Wednesday, and then into Thursday morning. And Thursday morning, it was so bad, and the headache was so bad, I started to get lightheaded when I would stand up or sit down. And even when I was laying in bed, have you ever rubbed your eyes too hard and you see like those little yellow stars? Do you know what I'm talking about? I was seeing those when I was just sitting, minding my own business in bed. So I knew something was up. And so my brother came over, he drove me to the ER, and we go in. And I'm talking with the doctors and the nurses and stuff, and they're asking me like, hey, what did you take for the symptoms? Man, did you try and get rid of the headache? And I was like, look, just in case it was a symptom of something deeper going on, I didn't want to mask the symptom, right? And this is what I was telling every nurse that would come in. Well, eventually the main doctor, she strolls in and she asks me the same question, and I gave the same answer. You know what she says? She goes, well, here, we're just going to mask the symptom. I was like, great, that's perfect. Thank you for that. And the reason I tell you that story is because if you approach lust, or making sure you're not falling into your own lust, by using the methods that most people are selling you online or recommending to you online, all you're going to be doing is treating symptoms. You're going to be masking. That's all you're going to be doing. Because looking at that example that I just gave you of the guy who goes through a rough breakup and suddenly the amount of pornography he's watching shoots up, the amount of times he's falling into lust and looking at lustful things and going back to masturbation or any of these kinds of, methods of lust, those didn't go up because suddenly he was now seeing more lustful things, because suddenly his testosterone went through the roof. And so if you try and do the normal approach that everyone else is like saying online, where it's like, oh, well, you need to use blockers, man. You need to use Quitter or whatever app, Covenant Eyes. You need to use Covenant Eyes and block stuff. First of all, it doesn't work anyways, because if you really want to watch it, you can just find your way through the settings and turn it off. And even if you can't get to the websites, you'll find a different way. You'll use a different device. You'll go on Instagram and look for videos, because Instagram and sometimes TikTok too. I don't really scroll TikTok anymore. But they basically have like softcore porn. So does Snapchat. And if you can't do it that way, then maybe you'll go and reaffirm yourself and try and distract yourself emotionally with lust by texting 8, 10, 12, as many different women as you can text at once. Or you'll go to hookups or any of this kind of stuff. And so any of the advice that they're actually prescribing to you is nothing more than cutting off the symptoms. It doesn't address the root problem. And you know this already, even if you're not the one currently going through a breakup right now, that obviously it's triggered by something else. Because when were you introduced to pornography? It wasn't last year. It wasn't when you were 23 years old right after the breakup. No, most guys, I know for myself, I'll speak for myself, I got introduced to pornography by kids in my neighborhood at the age of 7. By the time I was 12, I would use it most nights to go to sleep. And at first, it almost started off as a little bit of an infatuation, but I can remember almost being grossed out by it at first. But for some reason, I kept going back and I kept going back. And then eventually it started to just become a habit. It started to meet a need. 7, 10, 12 years old, that's years before I ever had my first relationship or my first breakup. That's years before I started trying to grow my own business or working jobs and I was super stressed, or I was in school and actually having to take exams and stuff all the time. And that left me with, tons of anxiety about the future. I didn't have any of that stuff, yet I was still going back to pornography all the time. You were probably the same. If you got introduced to pornography, for most of my clients, I found that most people get introduced to it between the ages of like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Typically, it's like around middle school time, early middle school time is when they get exposed to it. You didn't have any of these things that everyone's telling you it could be and the things in your mind right now that you think it is. You're like, oh yeah, it's just when I get super stressed that I go to it, or whenever I'm super anxious, that's when I go to it. It is not the initial little feeling that's driving you back to it. You should not be going to one of the most, just think about this very practically, like just kind of like zoom out and look at this from like a 3D perspective and just tell me if this makes sense. I'm feeling a slightly, what we would call a negative emotion, stress, anxiety, loneliness, whatever. I'm feeling this slightly negative emotion. Therefore, I'm going to go to the most self-destructive behavior I know. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense at all. Nor should anxiety or stress or any of these things be the reason that it drives us back to that. Like, it's not necessary. Obviously, something else is going on. I even got this glass of water. I filled it up about as much as I could. I didn't want to spill it all over myself. But I want you to just keep this glass of water in mind. I'm going to talk about this in just a second because I want to give you an analogy that hopefully will start to connect the point that I'm trying to make. Because even like the client who joined my program today, when we were talking about it, yeah, sure, his breakup could be a piece of it. Yeah, the fact that you have a stressful job or the fact that you're worried about the future, yeah, sure, that could be a piece of it. But ultimately, it's nowhere near the reason that's actually driving you back to it. Let me give you an example of this, right? I want you to imagine you as this cup of water, your mind, your mental state, your soul as this cup of water. And just stick with me as I do this. Just imagine this cup was filled all the way to the brim. I tried to fill it as much as I could, but just imagine it's filled all the way to the tippy top to where if I grabbed it, it would like practically spill over. And then imagine I use one of those like droplet things, that'll drop like one little droplet of water into there. And imagine I drop one extra drop of water. And because of that, it breaks the seal and the water overflows all over this table right here. That one extra drop is not the entire reason there's now water all over my counter. The cup was already filled all the way to the brim. And the reason I'm telling you this, I know this sounds like an odd analogy, and this is what I'm trying to get at. That extra drop of water that's putting it over the edge and causing the water to spill everywhere, that's the anxiety, that's the loneliness, that's the stress that you feel throughout the day that's causing it to finally just blow up, and then you go back to this most like super self-destructive behavior that you don't want to be going to, that messes you up spiritually, that messes up your confidence, that messes up you finding your God-given purpose, that messes up, your productivity or any of this other kind of stuff. But the cup being completely full of water was already a problem to begin with. It was already filled to the absolute brim. And if it wasn't filled to the absolute brim, then me doing one extra drop of water in there wouldn't have caused this just overflow of water across my table. In the same way, that one extra drop of anxiety, that one extra drop of loneliness, any of this stuff shouldn't have caused this to overflow. Your cup is completely full from all the grief that you have not dealt with, all of the things from your childhood that have not yet been solved. All of the internal insecurities and doubts and fears that you have internally and the failures that built those belief systems, that's what causes this. Because if it was just your stressful day, if it was just the anxiety that you have after a long day's worth of work, if it was just the breakup with the woman that you loved, although sure these can be symptoms, then all those things were long after you started watching pornography and long after you knew it was a problem and you tried not to watch it, but you kept going back to it. 7-year-old you, 9-year-old you, 10-year-old you, 12-year-old you was not getting broken up with and did not have to go work a 50-hour week at his job and he's stressed out. Like, that's not the problem. Or even worse, if you like the guys that are married, they're like, yeah, well, my wife's not giving it to me as much as she used to, and that's why I'm going back to it. No, that's not true at all. And I know it's not true because this is the question that I ask them, and every time they're like, well, yeah. I just go, hey, so when you guys were like dating, were you guys having sex and stuff pretty regularly? Because most of the time when I'm working with an older guy, a lot of times they found Christ after they got married, which is fine. Everyone comes to the Lord at different times. But they'll say, yeah, like we were having sex regularly. And then I ask them like, hey, were you still going to pornography then? Like when you guys were just dating, even though you guys were having sex all the time? And you know what they always say? Yes, because pornography and lust, going to any of these forms of lust, texting a bunch of different women, any of this kind of stuff, has nothing to do with actual like sexual activity, with sexual gratification. It's the means that you're getting to try and fill something else that's going on. And so a question that maybe you've thought of before, people will say it online, is what does pornography give you? Like beyond just the good feelings, obviously, like the dopamine rush and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm asking you. What does pornography give you? That's the question that people will tell you. I don't think that's the best question to ask because that's just going to lead you to the answers that you have right now. Oh, well, I work a stressful job. Oh, we've been having relationship problems. Or, oh, I just went through this tough breakup. The correct question to ask is what does pornography give you that younger you wasn't getting when he was growing up? What does pornography give the 7-year-old version of you? What does pornography give the 10-year-old version of you? What does pornography affirm or quiet or be an imitation of inside the little kid version of you? The version of you that first got exposed to pornography and kept going back and kept going back and even knew he didn't want to keep going back, or he would even grew up Christian, so he knew it was wrong and it wasn't something he was supposed to be doing, or it even felt unnatural. And yet even in the times in which you don't even feel tempted, you would still go back because you couldn't sit in bed at night and just scroll and scroll and scroll. And eventually you'd get to this point where just trying to lay there and go to sleep, there's something fundamentally wrong. Like you just feel like this almost feeling internally of like something is off. And so you would go searching for anything to just quiet that little feeling and numb yourself out. If you can journal on that or think on that and find some of those things, that's going to actually start to reveal what is actually driving you back to pornography in the first place, what is causing you to go to your lust in the first place. And doesn't this make way more sense now? If you address these things and you were able to heal those things and grow into a better man because of healing those things, then a blocker is not needed. You don't need something to keep you from going and loading up the website because you have no desire to load up the website. And sure, you might get the little instances where, just naturally we're in this body of death, what Paul calls it over there in Romans 6, Romans 8, something like that, where yeah, you're gonna have fleshly temptation like that, but then you can simply just submit yourselves to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. James chapter 4, verse 7. One of the most common limiting beliefs someone will tell me whenever I start to work with them, like guys in my program and stuff, one of the ones a lot of times guys will identify is, I just feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And I think a big reason for this is because they've watched so many videos on how to get out of lust or pornography. They've worked with so many different people. They've read the books. They've bought other programs, any of this kind of stuff. And all that ends up happening is they stay stuck without realizing that they don't actually want to give up pornography because pornography is aiding and nursing some type of other core thing that is going on. And this is why a lot of times you're so inconsistent in other areas of your life, whether it's the gym or in your finances or just spiritually. It's always like a roller coaster. Yeah, because eventually every now and then those wounds need to be treated, which means you numb yourself out and you self-destruct. And if you could get clarity on what these core wounds are and you heal them, I promise you, then it makes it way easier to stay consistent because then you no longer are trying to escape life. And instead, you can actually begin to develop the habits and the daily routines and put in the work to build a life that you never feel the need to escape from. I'm telling you this because the way that you live your life is based off of the beliefs that you have. Even your identity and how you view yourself and how you talk to yourself and what you believe about yourself It's all just rooted in your beliefs, which are based off of your experiences. The thing is, most of the experiences that we had were given to us. Most of the beliefs we have were given to us. Most of the thought patterns and belief systems that we operate from on a daily basis were given to us by the people that we grew up with, the things that we watch, the things that we listen to, the things that we consume. And so you have this whole underlying belief system that you live off of that you're not even aware of. And then you're trying to change it and say, oh yeah, well, I need my identity rooted in Christ. Oh, I need to be more disciplined, which by the way, discipline won't be the thing that gets you out of like falling into lust anyways. You have to change the underlying things. But once you handle these things and you actually heal them and grow past them, you will stop struggling with lust. You will still have urges, but that's when you can take your sexual energy that you naturally have as a man that's God gifted, God made it. We know God gave you your sexual energy because God made sex. He made everything that's good. God even called it good. You take that energy, and until you're married, until you can have sex in the confines of marriage, you channel it and build yourself into a better man of God. You put it into your business. You put it into building your physique. You put it into making yourself a more competent man. This is what books call sexual transmutation. Notice how I'm using a different term too. There's a difference between sexual energy and lust because there is a level of dehumanizing that always has to happen with lust. There's always a level of neglection. There's always an ignoring. There's always a lack of thinking about the fact that the woman that you are lusting over is made in the image and likeness of God. There's always a lack of thinking about the fact that the woman in that video that you're watching is a daughter to somebody, is a mother to somebody. You don't think about these things though when you're caught up in lust. And notice, even in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus said, if you even look at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart. Lust is something that starts in the heart. It starts where? Internally. The heart is representative of your soul, of your spirit. It starts internally. Why? Lust doesn't start once you go and load up the website. Lust doesn't start once you have sex with that woman. Lust started the moment you begin to imagine doing it. It's when the moment you allow your internal being, your internal mind, your imagination to build all of that up. But why does it start internally? Why does lust start internally? Lust starts internally because you have an incorrect vision internally of yourself, of others, of the world, etc., of sex, etc., etc. If you want a separate video where I explain the difference between lust and sexual energy, I'm happy to do that. But I wanted you to just take this thought away, and I know my Chipotle's got to be cold by now, and I really want to eat this. So I do hope this video blesses you, man. If you have any questions, down in the description, I'll leave my Instagram link there. I post on my Instagram stories all the time. I'm constantly talking about the Bible, talking about scripture, talking about building yourself in God, all these different types of things, getting out of lust. And so if any of these things are a priority for you, making more money, that stuff sounds interesting, drop me a follow on Instagram. And then also, like I said, if you have any questions, DM me on there. I'm going to grub up on this Chipotle. Be blessed.